What are some truths from Scripture that you felt like were very encouraging to you as you thought about saying yes to a role that includes fundraising? I know one for me that comes to the top of my head is the parable of the treasure hidden in the field. One of my absolute favorite parables. It's really short, but if you're not familiar, it's the kingdom of God is like a man who finds this treasure in this field. He buries it. Then he goes and sells everything he has to buy that field. And it never really stuck out to me that much until I was in a season of fundraising, but that he buried it. So if you are this guy's friends and family, what you're seeing is this guy is selling everything he owns for an empty field because you don't know about the treasure. But he knows about the treasure. And so it gave me some comfort and some confidence when there were other people in my life who were taking very different career paths and they kind of thought I was crazy. Well, they're going to think that because all they're seeing is the empty field. But I am seeing the treasure and I know the treasure. And it was really like focusing more on that treasure that also helped carry me through fundraising, and for me, that treasure is Jesus, the old hymn, turn your eyes upon Jesus, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, then the things of earth will grow dim in the light of his glory and grace. So as you focus on that treasure, everything else will grow dim. And as you really, think about that treasure, then selling everything else, making some crazy decisions, doing something that is definitely the norm from other people in your life, it is the only thing that makes sense at that point.
I think about the story of the feeding of the 5,000. So Jesus gets off a boat. This huge crowd is following him. They end up in a field. It's a desolate place. There's thousands and thousands of people there. And Jesus is teaching for a while, and after a long period of time, his disciples come to Jesus. The disciples come to Jesus, and they say, hey, they're getting hungry. We should send them away into the surrounding villages so that they can get themselves something to eat. It sounds like a good idea. The disciples are thinking like leaders. And then Jesus all of a sudden turns to them and says, you give them something to eat. And there's thousands of people here. Just the powerlessness that they had to feel like, we can't get them food. We don't have money. You just told us not to carry a money bag. What are you talking about, Jesus? And you can that's how I felt at times, is how am I going to raise this money? What am I going to do? How am I going to make these phone calls? How are they going to think of me? And you just feel incapable of doing what God has asked you to do. But what I love about that story is Jesus responds to them and says, how many loaves of bread do you have? They say, we don't know. So he says, go and see. And I love that they obey that command. They walk around and they say, do you have any bread? Do you have any bread? And they come back and they've got 5 loaves and 2 fish. And what I love is that they don't just look at the 5 loaves and 2 fish and go, well, we don't have enough to feed everybody. I guess we shouldn't bring this to Jesus. No, they give it to Jesus, right? And what does he do with it? He multiplies it. And so the idea that I see there is, hey, you can't do it. You're not going to have the ability, the energy, the passion to do it. You don't have the resources to do it. You take what little you have, your faith, you say, Jesus, I got 5 loaves and 2 fish. Will you multiply this? And he does. And so just I remember in that season just thinking about that story and what I was feeling and the reality that Jesus isn't asking me to really change the world. He's just asked me to bring what I have to him. And so I'm bringing these names, I'm bringing these phone calls, and I'm just asking him to multiply it and just watch him do the work.
I think a really simple truth I come back to is a verse that my husband and I read, or we say out loud to my son every night before bed, which has been such just a reminder for my husband and I of the simple truth that I think in support raising, we so have to lavish upon ourselves, remind ourselves. So it's Joshua 1:9, which is, why am I blanking now?
For I know that.
Thank you. I'm saying Atlas's name before. I'm okay. Joshua 1:9 is, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And there's so many things in that verse. He's commanding us, don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. But I think the end is one of my favorite parts, this idea that the Lord is with us wherever we go. As we're support raising, he's with you. He's walked before you and ordained your meetings, ordained who's going to be on your team, but he's also walking right alongside you. And as you go overseas, like he is with you no matter where your feet walk. And there's something really simple about that as a believer. Like we know that the Lord is with us wherever we go, but to remember who God is, this kind of God that we serve, and he is walking with us in support raising every step of the way, every phone call, every meeting, every drive to the coffee shop before you get out of the car and meet with somebody. Like he is with us. And not only is he with us, he gives us the confidence enough to say, do not be frightened, do not be dismayed. So like we can have confidence and boldness in support raising, and it's biblical. Like he's commanding us, don't be frightened, don't be dismayed, because I'm with you. It's nothing we can do in our own strength. It's no pep talk I can give to myself that would be good enough. But the Lord's saying, I'm commanding you to not fear because I'm promising you that I am with you. And I just think, wow, like what a simple but beautiful truth that I have to remind myself of daily. But in support raising, what a beautiful picture that you're not walking in this journey alone. Every step you take is with the Lord, hand in hand, walking with you.
A really simple one for me is Psalm 40, verse 1. It says, you inclined your ear to me and heard my cry. And I think that encouraged me a lot at the point during fundraising when I would have fears or worries or doubts, to know that I could bring those to the Lord and he would hear my cry was super encouraging. And similar to what you're describing with Joshua, the people have reached the Red Sea and they're trembling and uncertain, full of fear and doubt, and for them to be told, you have no need to fear, you only need to be still and the Lord will fight for you. And so I think that encouraged me a lot in times when my work week during fundraising looked so different to what felt like work previously in life, and so to be able to rest in the Lord and know that it's him who's doing the work, and I can be still. I can live at peace even when my level of work looked different to my expectation or my picture of success. To know that the Lord was still working even in my rest was really helpful.
I'm thinking of it maybe in a more broader sense, in that Jesus has commanded us to go and make disciples. But who am I to listen to Jesus? Who is Jesus that I would follow him, that I would be obedient to go overseas, that I would be willing to tithe my career? And the story that really reflects to me who Jesus is Peter's first encounter with Jesus after he's denied him, how Jesus embraces him and sits and have breakfast with him. After Peter just done something he was adamant that he wouldn't do, yet he did it. And Jesus, in his compassionate love for us, embraces him and sits with him. And that's who Jesus is. He is a Savior worth following to the ends of the earth, because at the end of that Great Commission, like Abby said, he's promised that he is with us to the end of the age. And that's powerful, that you can go confidently. You can walk through this season of support raising knowing that God is with you every step of the way.
So one last question is there any encouraging stories you want to share from your own personal experience from support raising?
I have a really goofy one that's a little bit embarrassing, but I think we'll be vulnerable. So when I was support raising, phone calling was the hardest thing. And if you know me, I am not usually one of little words, and I love people. Like I don't often struggle to communicate. I just think it's something the Lord has put in me. Like I just love meeting new people. I love working with people, but for some reason, the idea of making phone calls in support raising was like terrifying. So much so that I would like type someone's number and then not press the green button. Like I would sit there for minutes and like pray, but not feel anything, and pray some more. And there were so many times I would type a number and be sitting there at my kitchen table, and my husband would come alongside and press the green button, and I would like panic, like, no, you pressed it, now I have to talk to that person, I'm not ready. And I like needed the support of somebody to come and press the button, but also so weird. I guess I'm motivated by food. So phone calls were hard for me. So I would put like my favorite snack by the phone. And if I made 5 phone calls, whether they answer the phone or not, I would allow myself to have like 1 dark chocolate covered almond, and then I'd make 5 more phone calls. Okay, 1 more. So like I didn't have the support of somebody there with me. I like had to almost play these mind games to get the job done, which I know sounds really weird. But to be honest, like as a coach, I've been coaching for 8 years. There was so much fear in phone calling. Like, and I could feel this like overwhelming sense of fear that, to be honest, I hadn't really felt in my life before, especially in what it was regards to. So just know if like phone calling feels scary for you, the idea of it, or the practical application, you are not alone. And there's so many things you can do. People supporting you, snacks if that works, post-it notes by your phone. And I think it's a really goofy story, but also just really real to say like there are parts of support raising that may be overwhelming and may be scary, but with the Lord and just with some encouragement and the people He's put around you and maybe snacks, like you will get through the hard parts and look back and just see how beautiful the Lord was to put people in your life to teach you how do you do something that feels really hard. Because now as I look back, things that feel challenging and hard in my life, I reflect back on those phone calling days, the moments I sat at that table for hours agonizing a single phone call. And it has given me confidence to face fears that I have now that have nothing to do with support raising. Maybe it's the Lord like urging me to talk to somebody that I come across. And so I like think back to how He was so sweet and faithful in those fears, and then that carries over into like what I fear now. I don't have to use chocolate covered almonds every time, but just remembering those days that seemed really hard have pushed me to do, I would say, harder things now, like 8 years later.
I think about the people that just really caught me off guard, people that weren't even on my radar. For the time that we lived, or that I served in 2 years with GoCorps, and then the 5 years I served overseas after GoCorps, there was a man on our team who, to this day, I only ever spoke on the phone with. I have no idea what he looks like. I only know his name. And he was a connection through my dad, and he faithfully gave every single month. Like, that just blows me away that God would put that person in my life. Or the season that I was in before we got married and went overseas together, I was working at my dad's restaurant as a server. And because my life was heading towards overseas work, I talked about it a lot with my customers. And I had 2 customers in that 9-month period join our team, complete strangers to me, but they were excited about what we were doing and jumped on board. But I also think about the people that really sacrificed. We had a woman on our team who, if she had a gym membership, her health insurance gave her a credit, and so she committed to joining a gym and working out so that she would get that credit, and she gave that credit to us, and that is how she supported us. And she was very intentional to tell us that anytime she's at the gym or on the treadmill, she's praying for us as she's doing that. And I think it was those little stories like that that just really meant the world to us.
One of my favorite support partnerships it was probably one of the very first phone calls and meetings that I set up when I began support raising as a 23-year-old right out of college. And I had set up the appointment, and driving to their house was praying and just asking the Lord, how much do I ask? What does that financial invitation look like? And I remember coming home from the appointment afterwards, having sat down with like an older couple that was my parents' age and their college age son. Like, it was a whole family sort of time together. And I came home after, and she and my mom are good friends, so they're texting and debriefing. And my mom comes to me appalled, like, I can't believe you asked them for this specific amount. Like, do you know the financial situation they're in, all of this? And I was all of a sudden, like, Lord. and so it set me down this path of questioning, like, was that right? Did I hear you right, Lord? What should I do now? And following up with them afterwards, a week had gone by, I'd given them time to pray, and I called to ask, how are you feeling led? How has your week been since we met? And they said, we aren't able to give the amount that you asked for. We can give this amount, but our son, who's in college, wants to cover the rest to make up the total of what you invited us to consider. And it was the coolest thing, like to just see God work through that conversation, that opportunity, that meeting, and to overcome those fears and doubts I started to feel, and the expectations that my parents were bringing in as well, and just all of that. It just remains a favorite for me. And to see that their college-age son, who's now not in college and is living his own life and job, he and his parents continue to faithfully give, and just how sweet that has been to remain connected with one another in that kind of partnership.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for inviting us into a lot of your stories and your wisdom and the ways that the Lord has used fundraising in your own life. And I just want to thank you guys for watching. If you have any other questions, we would absolutely love to just have a personal conversation with you. We have so many resources, and our job is to walk alongside you in this process. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll give a link that you can fill out to hear more from one of us coaches, because we want to answer your personal questions. So thanks so much, guys. And thank you guys for sharing.